completely valuable. The expanse that Tony has experienced within his life, I think we could safely say goes from the past, present, and the future.
Thank you.
So
hi, good to be here. Hi.
We wanted to go into a little bit about your experiences and
Sure.
about the time projects, as well as galaxy portal, Stargate hopping, the different methodologies that are being used to do this, the effects on the body, the symptoms, the experiences of what you've witnessed within all of the different forms that they're using, depending on your DNA and your capacity, and depending on what is within you that they can utilize, because depending on what your DNA is and how prime that is determines how much they can use. And you are, you know, a prime.
You're jumping right into the deep end of the pool for sure.
I always do.
So, you know, I mean, a lot of people, you know, I never know what I'm going to expect when I do an interview with somebody. Are they going to want the chronological story and then based with evidence? And it takes about, you want to jump straight into the space travel. And that was towards the end, you know, well, the second, what I did, what was called, what is coined as a 20 and back. It's a 20, and I was taken about 10 years old and lived for 20 years as a slave labor for various projects, and traded from one to the other, you know, like till they gave me a job, and when I was no longer useful at that job as I could have been, they trained me for a new job and then shipped me off, and I kind of bounced through a few places. Anyhow, toward the end, ended up working on a spacecraft that was based on the planet Ceres, a small dwarf planet in between Mars and the asteroid belt. And I was ultimately, I started out in maintenance, and then was promoted and was cargo engineer. And we did many trade missions around other stars throughout our galaxy, a lot of missions, and we went to other galaxies as well to trade. We were trying to trade, ideally, goods for technology or technology for better technology. And that was their entire mandate. The Ceres Colony Corporation was a breakaway civilization from Earth, from Germans, made up predominantly of Germans after World War II, the Nazi Germans that had broke away.
Is this related to any of the Hyperborean?
Well, according to them, I mean, they thought so, but, you know, I learned to, they were pretty, what's the word? They were pretty full of themselves. They were pretty high on themselves. So, you know, after a while, it kind of went in one ear and out the other, and I didn't really care to hear it because I was ultimately a slave, a second, third-class citizen to them. And so, you know.
Why do you think they chose you when they selected you? And, you know, this tells me at the age of 10, you were already trained, which also tells me.
So, what happened was I came in contact with somebody that had access to the programs, and they threw me into it. They threw me into a program, and it wasn't the Ceres colony in the first place. I was just into a black program and was going to do a 20 and back. I was taken to the trapezoid base behind the moon. Right. And, you know, there's speculation of how they did it. They could have been cloning. It could have been age regression. However, whatever technology they used, they took me, and then I was privately owned by somebody. I went through a trauma-based mind control program. I was a certain level of person. It wasn't that I was groomed. A lot of my lab people and a lot of people are groomed from birth and genetics, but that wasn't the case. I just was in the wrong place at the wrong time and made the wrong kid angry. And so his dad had access to the project. He said, "Dad, that's that kid that I told you about in school." And later that night, I had a gray, and I was taken out of my room and into the secret space programs. Like I said, it was about job aptitude. After I lost the ability to do one job or wasn't as good at it, or program was canceled, I was they tested me and then retrained me for another job, and then I was sold off or traded off, or however you want to word it, to the next project. And I ended up on the Ceres colony that happened to be the Germans. So they chose me because of they had a job to fill out there. There's a vast infrastructure of colonies in our solar system right now, and they all work with each other and kind of against each other as well.
Yeah, there's a huge black market, and from what I've experienced in some of it, it's all trade. Absolutely. But there's something interesting about you, because although you were at the wrong place at the wrong time, you have the genetics they were looking for.
Right. And so they did test me originally. They do a genetic test, and it took some time for it to come back, 20 minutes or so, half hour. And they said I just barely did. And I kind of hoped it, because I was a kid, and you always hope to pass a test,
right?
Whatever it was, I was passing, so I did. And I guess there are people that have ideal genetics that could go longer. So I did. Do
you remember the tests?
Yeah, well, they took a biopsy of my, they went in with something and extracted tissue from my brain tissue, and drew blood and things. So it was like a medical exam.
Right. How did you manage to find a way to deal with the 3D disguise reality, which is often masking what's really going on?
So, okay, so what you mean, I hope I understand this correctly. How did I deal with it after I knew?
Right.
like in our world now?
Yeah. Well,
Right.
even back then, in our world back then,
That's
because
a great question.
yeah.
Well, they put me back. So what happened was I was 10.
Mhm.
I lived for 20 years in those programs, and I had no memory of my regular life. My first 10 years, mom and dad
Right.
and my sisters, I had no memory. Those memories were gone. And I lived that life,
Mhm.
which was brutal at times, and turned into its own life, like grew into its own life. And then, there's age regression. So however they did it, I believe that they used cloning. I believe that there's a consciousness
Mhm.
transfer, and that they use cloning. That's my theory on it. But if you just get taken in for an emergency surgery on your spleen, you don't know what they did to your spleen. You just know you had surgery done. You don't know what happened, and
Right.
that's kind of my perspective. But there's other people that talk about age regression, that there is a chemical way to actually age regress somebody back exactly 20 years. Like when you grow, they can give you these chemicals, this treatment, or whatever it is,
Mhm.
and reverse your DNA back. So either way, I don't know, but that's what happened to me. And when they put me back, I was not the same person. I did not have the memories of the 20 years in space or the time, and I was not the same person I was. They put me back literally the same night. So I went to bed, was abducted. They put me back, lived 20 years, age regressed me, put me back in bed the same time. There's a time travel component,
Mhm.
right? And you lose people with that.
Yeah.
And then I woke up the next morning going, what the hell happened? Something happened. What happened?
Mhm.
But I was a different person. My family noticed that I was different. My dad said, you're different. I want my son back. I went down and told my family over breakfast that I felt like I hadn't seen them in 20 years. I haven't feel like I haven't seen you guys in years.
Mhm. Mhm.
No, really though. I mean, I haven't seen you in forever. And they thought I was weird. I went to school that day and had amnesia. I asked the teacher to go to the bathroom, and then I asked her where it was, and the whole class
Mhm.
laughed at me because I went to the bathroom the day before. But for me, the not the mind, not the memories, but the experience, I guess the experience of 20 years of time passing had been. So from that time on, so this is, I'm sorry to get wordy.
No, no.
From that time on, to answer your question, I knew something was wrong.
Mhm.
I knew that the world we lived in wasn't what it's presented. I
Mhm.
knew everything, the schooling. The other thing is, whenever I went to school up there, it was a completely different method, and it was much faster to learn.
Mhm.
And I lost interest in school because it was so archaic, because it was so much work to learn any little thing. And that was something I like. There were things that I knew, but I didn't remember why. I didn't have the memory. There were after side effects
Mhm.
that I didn't know why. And after I got my memories back, there was a there was a time of reckoning in uh, May of 2015 was when it happened, that I got all my memories back, and I was able to really squash a lot of things that were causing trouble that I didn't know why, because I finally remembered why.
Mhm. What are some, okay, two things, because you said the amnesia. The amnesia I found to be a huge, huge part of this. So I imagine you would have experienced amnesia more than once.
Well, just that time. Well, when I woke up, when they took me,
Mhm.
when I after they did that, I woke up when I began the 20-year tour. When I woke up that morning and began a trauma-based mind control, I had amnesia. I had no memory of my mom, my dad, where I came from, nothing.
Yeah.
And then I lived that 20 years. And at the end of that 20 years, they put me back, and I had no memory of that 20 years.
Mhm.
I haven't had any amnesia or anything since then.
Mhm. What about the symptoms? Because you said that there were certain symptoms associated when you came back.
Sure. Well, I was attracted to adult women all of a sudden. I was 10 years old and had no idea what sex was.
Yeah.
But in that 20 years, I had been with women, and, like I had been sexually abused even. And I was all of a sudden the next day sexually attracted to adult women. And that was not, what I mean? That's something I kept to myself because I didn't understand what was, I couldn't understand what was
Yeah.
happening. Literally the day before, I had no interest in girls whatsoever. They were icky.
Mhm.
And then all of a sudden looked at my teachers completely different. And that was hard. And that was something that I carried, that was, I guess, inappropriate. I didn't do anything about it, but I'm
Yeah.
saying inside me
Sure.
that changed. I had already been an adult man and then put back into a prepubescent boy. And
Right.
that was a very difficult thing. And it made puberty, my dating years, everything was a mess. because I didn't understand why I had different needs than everybody around me. You know, like all my peers, I was completely differently developed. And it wasn't until I got my memories back that I really was like, that's why, you know what I mean? I could put a cause to the effect, and then that just, it was easy to get over then. But, you know, unfortunately I was, 44 years old at the time.
What are some of the other symptoms you noticed?
Well, there's a major one. So I've worked with other people that have been through the 20, that, people come to me all the time with memories and they want some. And what I found is that not everybody that have said something, but often, so it's a 20-year mark.
Right.
I asked, why 20? Why not 30? Why not 100?
Mm-hmm.
Why not 10? And he said that it was a short reptilian on the base during the process. And he said to me that all species, it's a consciousness thing, that all species have a problem at the 20. It's random. Some people can go longer, but basically, when they put them back, they go insane.
Right.
So they cap it at 20 years because you don't, different species are different. Like you might be able to go 22 years and go back and be fine, but 23 years, and when they put you back, it causes insanity. And he said that was the reason, because people have a mental breakdown after 20. So they do, everybody is 20, it's the law. And what I found was that in other people as well, that there's always an event. People come to me and go, man, I was taken and I changed. Right? I had an event happen to me, and I could have swore I saw a reptile in my living room. And then I woke up the next morning and I felt different. And my life kind of went to hell and everything changed, and I've been getting, and then this and that. And I go, whoa. And over and over again with these people, hundreds of people contacted me. Over and over again, I say, wait a minute, when was that? And they never pay attention to that. I go, make a timeline up. And most people don't, and they never talk to me again. But people that do, I go, when was that? And they say 2002, or it's 98, 1998. And I say, well, what happened in 2018, 20 years later? And they go, wait a minute. And I got my life back together. Everything changed. I got divorced and everything. Like, there's always a life event at the end. For myself, the side effect was right at the 20-year mark. Well, for me, it was different. There's a different component. But it was right at the 20-year mark. All of a sudden, one morning in my regular life here in Michigan, I woke up and I said, it's over. I kept saying to myself, it's over. It's over. I didn't know what it was. I felt like $1 million. And I said, it's over. And from that time on, like, a lot of dysfunction, a lot of things, like I was like kind of a screw brain, like before that, I was like a messy room guy. It changed. Everything changed right after the 20-year mark, right after the 20 years of, basically April of 1982, right at the 20-year mark after that. But for me, it was about 2000, because the ship I worked on did missions daily. We left at 8 in the morning. We got back at 8 in the morning every day for years. So that chopped 2 years off the 20 years. So instead of 2002, it was 2018 was that day. I did the math, and it adds up. It works out. And so my alter person, me in the space program, did serve out a full 20 years, but it was 18 years for us on Earth, because there were long voyages involved. But so there's always an event. That's a side effect. That's one sure side effect. A lot of people have, depending on their roles they have sexual side effects, because it was a different thing, because there are different components, and it's a different culture in the space programs altogether, especially sexually. Everybody's aware they're going back, that there's no consequence. And there are a lot of the programs that are they push sex.
Yeah, it's the reward.
Right. And like I said, they're aware that they're going back. There's nothing to lose, kind of thing. There's no permanent stigma. Back. Yeah.
What do you think is the out of the experiences, and I'll ask also if you've had any experiences with future travel at all, or was it just purely market-based in terms of who you were affiliated with, and after you returned, if you were still owned by those people? So if that was also released?
It's a good question. So any kind of future stuff. So when they put me back,
Mhm.
and at some point I was returned to 1982 and was put in back into my young body.
Mhm.
And at that point, I had no memory of what was happening before. And I said I was going to remember you guys because I thought it was a first contact um,
Right.
situation. I was going to go tell the world that aliens exist. I was thrilled about it. I was so happy. And there was one looking on what was basically a chronovisor, and he could see my probable futures, not the future, not but the probable futures.
Mhm.
And he saw that I remembered, and they started to do other procedures to try to make it, but they didn't stop. And that's kind of a long story in itself. But they were looking at probable futures, so they had the ability to communicate with themselves in the future and in the past.
Right.
Technology.
And they didn't want you remembering.
Absolutely not. No,
No.
I was supposed to get a lobotomy. When they had concluded that there was nothing they could do. They put me through all this trauma stuff,
Mhm.
and they concluded that I was going to remember. They were going to give me a lobotomy and put me back in my bed at night. And the next morning, I was going to wake up and be crippled, mentally crippled. And when they took me to the surgery, it was like a hospital. You know, if you've been in a hospital, and the one end is radiology and the other end is, cardiology.
Mhm.
It was like that, where I was in one end of the plane where I was getting my memories wiped, and they found out it wasn't going to work, so they sent me over to it for a surgery. And when I got there, there was a paperwork issue that my records had been deleted, and it was my captain. My captain back in Sirius had deleted my record for whatever reason, for a mission we had been on, or for whatever reason,
Mhm.
he deleted my records. And so they said, and the one that was with me said, well, go ahead and put him in the surgery. He said, we can't do that because if something goes wrong, there's no record of who did it, and no one would get into. So just put him back. And so I did not get the surgery, and they put me back.
I think that happened on purpose. Somebody was, looking out.
I won't argue to that. You know what I mean? Like I really have to entertain any crazy thought of why I have these memories and nobody else does.
Mhm. Mhm.
As this, a lot of people do. I mean, that's not fair to say that. I mean,
Mhm.
thousands of people do. But why I've had all these tons of memories, and just the timing
Yeah.
and what's happened with going on, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
on Gaia, I've been in tons of interviews, like how that all played out is kind of like it swept me into it, and
Mhm.
I didn't set out for it. So I have to entertain the thoughts that maybe somebody could be pulling strings.
Well, I was gonna say, I think somebody wants this to happen because they want the information to get out there. So
Sure.
you see a release of a lot of people that are under mandate to do it without
Yeah.
knowing it.
Right. Right.
So, and like they can see the future, and they do know, and they do know who has to do it as well, right? Because this is by design.
Yeah, they can see, right. They can see versions of the future, and probably in some ways they can see big changes that go down.
Yeah.
And I think that the chronovision, there's been rumors that the Vatican had it. I'm sure that the U.S. government has it,
Mhm.
and it's probable futures. They can narrow down probable futures and then make changes and manipulate it. So, I
Absolutely.
mean, it's a technology, and a lot of people, when you talk about the way that time space works, the Einstein theory, you know what I mean, between time, the average person can't get their head around it, how time works. And so, I mean, we're easily fooled.
Yeah, and so maybe talk about that as well, and just out of your own experience, how you feel time works and how they're manipulating everything with the technologies and the
So
very
we
end
did
of them.
something. So I'll give you so I don't have a ton of knowledge on the subject. Being a slave, people expect me to be able to rebuild a starship motor, and I cannot. Um, but what happened was we were doing something that was slightly illegal, and by we I mean the Ceres Colony Corporation.
Mhm.
We were doing something slightly illegal. We would get onto our ship in the hangar in the morning and wait for the go ahead to leave. And we would leave, and let's say it's 8 a.m.
Mhm.
and we would go and do our mission. And the missions could be tasked to be aggressive or not. You know what I mean? Like very aggressive mission, like going and steal from another race somewhere.
Right.
Steal.
Yeah.
And if we got shot down or something happened, we didn't come back. They set it up. It was a loophole. There. Okay, so they said that, and I said this many times to my spirit. So why don't you just go back in time and change it? You
Mhm.
guys can travel time. Why don't you just go back in time and
Right.
tell yourself no? And he said we can't do that because there are police. There are advanced beings that don't live inside our time space continu. They don't live inside time space. They live outside of it,
Mhm.
and they literally, their purpose is to police people taking advantage of time travel. And he said that one guy, they heard stories of somebody that time traveled in order to get rich or something, to profit, and they took him out of his body and put him in a miserable existence for 1,000 years as punishment, and
Wow.
then put him back in his body at the same exact moment. Like, they could do that. They took him out of his body, and he made him a frog or something, who knows, for 1,000 years.
Oh,
And
dear.
that was his punishment. So they said they have no desire. There was not one of them that was willing to risk it.
Right.
But what they had found was, okay, so imagine Ceres colony is a small planetoid, it's 580 miles in diameter. The ship would leave at 8 a.m.
Mhm.
and then it would come back at the maximum speed that ship could fly 5 minutes away
Mhm.
at 7:55 a.m., basically before it could go back home. This was a loophole in the laws with those beings. Okay, so the ship could not get back to the hangar before it left,
Right.
right?
Right.
So the ship left at 8, and it got back 5 minutes and 1 second distance farther than its maximum speed
So you
that
were
it
one
could go back.
second by the.
What?
So then there's like, I think what you're saying is that there's like a 1 second loophole when you.
1 second. Well, what I'm saying is the ship, they're not allowed to come back before they left.
Right. By one
Okay,
second, essentially.
but well, they're not allowed to come back before they left. They would have been in trouble. So what they did was they came back 5 minutes before they left, a distance away. But what could happen was they had an observation point, and they said, if the mission goes great, then you appear here. If the mission is a failure and there's somebody else there, you appear here, and we'll know that it's a bust. And they'll cancel the mission before it leaves, and it would disappear.
Oh,
And it was anti-telephoning. They were letting themselves know that the mission was a success. So that way they could draw the mission up to be very aggressive, to go there and kill somebody or steal something or do something very risky, very dangerous. The ship would leave, and when it came back 5 minutes before. So they knew at 5 minutes till that they could look out the window and see that ship there. And when they saw the ship there, it was still 5 minutes away. They said, "Okay, you guys are a go," and
right.
we would fly out and we would do our mission. They, even me, that well, I worked at the time. I worked in maintenance, and I didn't have a window, and I had no contact with any other staff. I was down in maintenance. They still briefed us after when a mission went wrong. We would go in. What would happen when they canceled it? When a mission went wrong and they scrubbed it, we would stay there and clean the. We would stay in the hangar in the ship all day and clean it. And they would debrief us, and they pull us. And what they wanted to know for the next few months, they said for the next few months, we want to know if you dream anything strange. Did you have any strange dreams last night? If you have any strange dreams tonight, we want you to come in. And they were really big on that. It was because certain people, when they anti-telephone, when they canceled that, certain people still could experience the mission through dreams, and
Uh,
they needed to get data on it. Some people did. I never had any kind of thing like that. But they would scrub missions all the time. It happened quite often. And the other thing was is that the ship not appear when the ship appeared, and when they canceled, as soon as they gave the ship would appear
mhm.
in the wrong spot or not appear, and they would cancel the mission, and it would disappear. The
Right.
change was immediate. So what I'm saying is changes to the timeline work kind of like that and happen is instantaneously. As soon as the differences, if you can see into time different, if you can see back
Mhm.
when you're far away, when you're 5 minutes away at very fast speeds, you're back in time. You're looking back in time, right? Essentially,
Right.
you can see that, and then it changes. That's how it worked.
So,
So it's a headache to think about.
well, okay, so the dreams that you would have now, or the dreams that you've had since, is there any connection in your life when you returned in real dream, that have any relationship still to the projects?
Oh yeah, I dream about stuff out there all the time. The one I've recently had is that I dream of the bugs coming in my front door of my home here. I always have that. I have a dream, a reoccurring dream, that there's a giant spider,
Yeah.
one of the bugs on Mars,
Mhm.
a Mars bug, put it that way,
Mhm.
and it's sticking its tentacle, it's sticking its arm, one of its arms under my door, and I turn around and walk away, and when I turn back, it's in the air coming at
And it's huge.
me. Yeah, and it's big enough to wrap all the way around you.
Right.
So that's a reoccurring dream I've had.
Mhm.
The other thing, when I was on, so that when they asked me, when they debriefed me about dreams on series, I had crazy dreams. Every time using every time is a kind of a misnomer, but most of the time when I had a dream on series, I was always in my room. I would dream that the dream would start out that I was in my room or at my work post
Mhm.
or at the cafeteria, like somewhere. The dream would always start out with me somewhere like that, and then the floor would fall out and I would fall into space. The floor would go away and I would fall into black space with starfield, and then a dream would happen. That's how they all started. It was this weirdest thing, and that was on series. That was just how it happened. And there were times when I was asleep and dreaming that I made friends. I felt like I made friends,
Mhm.
and with other people like me that were on different planets in the solar system. Like, it was weird. But that was basically that.
Do you have memory? Well, okay, two questions. Do you have memory when you meet people today, that you recognize them? And what are all the different kinds of beings that you witnessed and had communication or, saw?
Okay, so that's a lot of questions.
I know.
But there's a lot of questions there. But
There's just so much
no.
to talk about.
Okay, so I've met people. I've met a handful of people that I met up there.
Mhm.
I'll say that. Number one. Number two, it's very uncool for me to tell them. I know there are people on my Facebook that I could say, look, it was you.
Mhm. Mhm.
And it's very uncool. And I did that once.
Okay.
And what I found was that it can wreck someone's life. It's not
Absolutely.
something you force upon them.
Mhm.
So if people don't ask me, I won't tell them. I'm not gonna. It's not up to me to volunteer to somebody. If they ask me and say, do you think you knew me?" The other thing is, I've had people contact me that I knew it was them, but I didn't recognize them at first because one of the steps. Remember, I said, like the hospital, like you go to radiology. One of the departments was devoted to completely making you forget people's faces. So when I think back to my captain's fate, my captain, I can see like my memory of my captain.
Mhm.
I can see him in his uniform and everything. I can't see his face. His face is blurry, and
Right.
that's a technology they use. So there's a lot of people. I get asked a lot. People that I swear I remember you. Do you remember me? And I'm like, we're on Facebook, and all I can see is your picture. I don't know. I'd love to meet you and
Mhm.
see, because you can feel a vibe when somebody's in the room.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like, but it's hard for me to remember. So
Mhm.
there's that. But I get asked it quite a bit. You'd be surprised. A lot of people contact me and think, I know you, man.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking,
Right.
uh, but it has happened. Like I said, I'm probably up to like 5 or 6 people that I've met out there that I can remember that I know in
Mhm.
down here. The other one is all the in races. I mean, okay, so I guess when you look at ufology,
Mhm.
your average contact has a handful of races that they report on,
Right.
that they come in contact with. Some people only one race. I met the Pleiadians.
Mhm.
Pleiades.
Mhm.
The Pleiades has 100,000 stars in it,
Mhm. Mhm.
with 70,000 planets like Earth in there. There's all different species
Mhm.
of all manners of species they could be from there. So it's a big place. The Pleiades, when someone says they're a Pleiadian, they're hiding who they really are.
Yeah.
A lot of people have had that, but I came in I stood in the room, I stood in public with many different kinds. I was not allowed to speak to them or interact with them. When I was on the subway in series, being a slave, I was not allowed to interact.
Mhm.
There was one time when I met one that's like a high density being.
Mhm.
So densities are a thing. They call it, life is organized, consciousness organized in densities. And I think that they had, the Germans also, the Series colony had a number designation for races, like densities. They had another designation. God, it was E1, E2, E2B, E2, E3, E3B. It was something like that. So there was an E5, you know, and I'm kind of filling the gaps because I don't remember the exact term. But there was one that was very advanced, and these are beings that are so advanced that they can manipulate things with their mind. You know, turn an apple into a frog with their mind, kind of thing. Very, very advanced being. And I got on the train with one, and it was a female, and she looked at me and smiled. Dark blue, about 11 feet tall. She was laying down and taking up the entire row of seats. And because she was who she was, everybody stood up and gave her space. Like you couldn't interact with her. It was against, you know, it's a cultural thing to not interact with beings like that, to not, you know, go up to them and bother them.
Right.
It was a cultural thing. Like, no, everybody, it was hello, say hello. That was the thing. They were like, say hello, acknowledge them, and get out of their way. That was what we were told to do. So I said hello, but and also she had a thing like a jewelry. She had a like a white dress. I'll call it a dress. It wasn't exactly a dress. It was more of a coat dress. It was white and shiny, and she was beautiful, and she smiled at me when I walked on. She looked at me and smiled, gave me a big smile, and I was just over the moon. I felt like I saw a unicorn. But when you looked at her, you could see a 3D effect in between you and her, of shimmering of light. Like, and it was a jewelry. It was a form of jewelry for them. And when you looked away, you couldn't see it anymore. It was like a hologram, but it was like a lens effect or something. When you looked at her, you could see shimmering in the air in between you.
Right.
When I looked at her, and I went, you know, and she looked at me and smiled, and I was just like overcome, right, with this. It was a joyful feeling to see that. And then I looked away and I looked back and I went, and then somebody in the back, there was a military guy that said, "Hey, come on, move along." And I stood in the back and I was just blown away. But you had to be looking at her to see it.
Right.
If you looked away, you didn't see it. So it was, who knows what kind of technology that was, but it was. I was later told that it was a jewelry that they have.
Was she? You said she was blue.
Dark blue.
Dark blue.
Yeah, like a dark blue.
Did she have hair, or was she hairless?
No hair. She looked like a gray, but she had like a ridge right here with lines in it, like indentations in her right here, and she had a shape of like a gray person, like a gray, had that shape, and she was very tall. I mean, she was every bit of 10 feet tall, 11 feet tall, and she laid down. So the train had seats on each side of the train, and she took up two of them. She was laying sideways. You know, like she had to bend down to crawl in there. And when the train stopped and she got out before I did. Yeah. There was a crowd, you know, like people there, so I couldn't really see her, but there was a crowd trying to get on the train too, and they all had to get back. People were telling them, "Step back, get back, get back." Yeah. And she got out.
Yeah, yeah.
You know what I mean? And it was like, you know, it was kind of the feeling in the whole train, like somebody let the air out of the place.
Yeah.
You know, when we kept going, we were like bummed, you know, like a celebrity, but it was different. It was, you know, she was a very advanced being. She had a designation of a super advanced being.
Right.
There were two other beings that lived there on Ceres that were indigenous or whatever. They were two other races that were working directly with the Ceres Colony Corporation, and they lived there. And one of them was about 9 feet tall, elongated head. They had hair, curly. The one that I knew had curly hair, black eyes, dark black eyes that were scary. And like a person, but then they came down and had wide hips, and they were about 9 feet tall, and they were a low gravity race. So the floor had artificial gravity plating, the whole place, everywhere, which was a marvel to me because it was miles and miles of it. But wherever he went, the gravity would lower.
Right.
So he lived in less gravity than us. And then there was another race of elongated skull guys with big eyes, colored eyes, and different color hair, but always straight hair, always very straight hair. And they were more of a technical, like they were tech guys. They worked on the ship's engines, and they worked in the hangar on doing repairs and upgrades to ships and things like. So they had technical knowledge.
Right.
On the moon, I met short reptiles, and they were strong. And the one I got to talk to one for a good half hour. I had a time where we waited, and he had a sense of humor, and he He said he went home to his wife and kids every day on his planet.
Mhm.
So he teleported home, however that happened. But and there were grays. There's a lot. We went to a planet and I met one that was like a rat, like a cross between and I don't want to sound bad, but when I say a cross between an Asian human
Mhm.
and a rat,
Mhm.
like some kind of marsupial. Like, do you like that? They were predominant. He had short gray fur,
Mhm.
and he had the face of an Asian, like the facial features, like we would assume with an Asian. And he was neat, unique guy, and about 4 feet tall, 3.5, 4 feet tall, about 60 pounds.
Mhm.
He had a tail,
Mhm.
and he had feet, no shoes, and and that was their world. We were there trying to trade with them.
Right. Did you ever meet any orange people?
Yes, actually, there was. Well, I got. So you're talking me into parts of the story that are hard to believe, but basically, I got mugged,
Mhm.
and he had orangish hair and like auburn skin, like almost an orange skin, and it was more like a cat. This part of his face looked like a cat,
Mhm.
his mouth, and he
Right.
was ugly. He was an ugly, like I'm not saying his race was, but I'm saying he was an ugly person, and he was there with somebody that was like a fish, like that had fish features of a fish, a skinny one. I've got artist drawings, but
Mhm.
I don't remember him that well. But they basically beat me up. I was in the red light district of Ceres colony and was lost, and they were in uniform, so I thought that they could help me out because everybody else was a civilian.
Yeah.
And I went up to them and what are you doing? You're a slave. You don't even belong here. What are you doing here? And they were just really combative. And they said, how do you plan on getting out of here? Do you have any money? I said, I've got money right here. And I pulled out of my pocket and he punched me and they beat me up for a while and took my money.
Wow. So they were just rogue people that lived
So, yeah.
there.
So, I mean,
Anarchists.
I'm trying to dispel the thought that all extraterrestrials are noble.
Mhm. Mhm.
They're people. They are
Yeah.
people just like we are people. And there are some people, and people are not only good and bad, but they're good and bad on different days.
Yeah.
You can catch me on a bad day, and I'll seem like a total prick.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? And vice versa. And
Yeah.
I know everybody in my life has been. If the closer you get to know somebody, the more likely you'll see them on a bad day, and you'll see their bad side. So ETs are exactly the same.
Yeah. What do you think so if I were to say, okay, Tony, what do you think is really going on here? What's the deal? What's the full-on agenda? What's the Mac Daddy
We're owned.
call?
We're owned. This is a garden.
Yeah.
We are owned. We're in a busy part of the galaxy. We're in a very busy part of the galaxy where human consciousness, your consciousness,
Mhm.
and animals' consciousness evolves and eventually incarnates into a human being. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't want to stomp on anybody's religion, but I believe in reincarnation. You die and you live. Your consciousness is a valuable, tangible thing.
Yeah.
Not only that, but people are extremely talented,
Mhm.
and we are extremely programmable.
Mhm.
In other words, I mean, look at what's going on in the streets right now. We have been programmed to react in a stupid way,
Absolutely.
and we are being programmed. We're being programmed every day. We are easily programmable, and we are very talented and skilled. We are the cheapest, best robot money can buy,
Mhm.
trade can buy. So other races can come, and not only that, but the Earth is a plethora of different versions of us. Some
Mhm.
people can handle temperature better than others. Some people are more you know, empathetic than others, and some people are not at all. So we're suited for many different tests. So an ET race can fly by here, get permission at Jupiter, where everything really is, Brand. Get permission, come down here and take 20 people, clone them, make 10 each, have 200 of them, go to their project on their planet, wherever they're doing, build their pyramid or whatever they're mining, and then let those people die in their natural, or leave them there, who knows, let their lives play out, or kill them, whatever, and get their thingy mabob that they wanted and fly home.
Mhm. And you said
So
that this is all owned.
we're owned. This region of space is owned, and ETs have to get permission to come to the Earth.
So who owns this region?
Well,
Quadrant.
there's definitely, well, there are several. the word, I hate the word federation because Star Trek took it already, but there are several federations. There are several entities that are made up of different worlds from all over the universe, and they communicate with each other. And what they've done is they've imagine a market in every town, right? Imagine that somebody from every state in the United States gets together and we say, you know, every state has one item that you can sell in this market, and let's put a market in every town around the planet so that people have, and we can do that, and then they can trade with us. And so that's what's going on. There's a place like that in every solar system, like, and maybe not everyone, but most solar systems that have the ability to trade, and it's a communications way. It's like a bulletin board, only it's billions and billions of worlds. You'll never get to the bottom of it. You'll never get to the end of it. So you can say, I want to get a new form of laser beam. And that bulletin board can search and say, all these worlds have laser beams. And you can start at the top and go and contact them and go to their world and look at that, and try to trade with them. That's what the Ceres colony was doing. So there are many federations like that. The nearest one in this region of space, I understand, is the Draco, and that lines up with what I remember because they also had a base around Jupiter. They also told the Germans, the Ceres colony, what to do, when to jump and how high, and they were in charge of this sector of space.
So do you think they're working for somebody else, though? They're just representing a much higher authority?
Well, okay, so when you say reptilian, everybody thinks it's one or two, but a reptilian humanoid is actually a very popular evolution throughout the cosmos. It's very popular. There's reptilians are everywhere, and so that doesn't mean they're friends with each other or they like each other.
But the Drach, which the reptilian generally work for the Drach, but the Drach also represent something else.
Yeah, well, you know, everybody goes that it goes up to higher, like the archons that are running the Drach, that are running this and that. So, you know, it's a Pandora's box. I mean, who knows when you got, you know, and these are things you're talking about beings. And I describe it like this because in my experience, it's kind of been like this, that you and I, a dog is a being that understands a couple dozen words, a dozen words, 2 dozen words. And that's all they need for their understanding. Really, they can interact with their environment. That's all they need. We are beings with a couple 100,000 words because we have hands and feet and can articulate. And that's all that hand does the job for everything that we do to interact with our environment, for mating, for working, for feeding, for food. You know what I'm saying? Like a couple 100,000 words do it. There are beings with a couple million words. There are beings with millions and millions of words. Because they have a bigger conscience, because they have, you know what I mean? And so when you're asking a question, who's in charge? That's really, we don't have the words for, I don't have the words for that. I don't have the word to give you for that.
So if you were to say which planet in the solar system is the one that's, you know, the agency or the power, the central power.
It's around Jupiter.
It's Jupiter.
The capital of the solar system is around Jupiter, and it's not humans. You know, it's not owned by humans. It's by whatever this region of space that, like I said, many entities of federations of worlds from all over the universe. They all always have a common ground. They establish a base, a space station or something, and it's around Jupiter.
Where does Saturn play into this?
Saturn was off limits to us. So I understood it from my time there that the moons around Saturn are inhabited, that there are even bases from Earth people that have bases around Saturn, but we weren't one of them, and we had no access to anything around Saturn. And I remember being really bummed about it because I always wanted to look outside and see. I remember when we were around Jupiter and I took the time to go out and look out the window, that I thought it looked like flowers. That when you look at Jupiter, if you look at it, the way that the liquid, I thought that they looked like a rose. You know what I mean? Like to me, it looked like flower. I said, it looks like a bunch of flowers because there's a real 3D effect when you're looking at it. But I didn't get to look at Saturn ever. And
Not at
Saturn was off limits. Venus was off limits. Pluto was off limits. And I understand that whatever species was living in Pluto was extremely hostile. Like they didn't even want to contact you. They didn't want to hear it. And so Pluto was off limits unless you were going to get in a fight. Same with Venus. Mercury, I think, had bases in there that was not us, that we had contact with, and the rest of the planets, and basically the moons around Jupiter. Some of them we had access to, some we didn't, and we had our own in the Kuiper Belt. We had our own set of asteroids that we had converted and made into storage space.
Right. So what was the feeling that you got with regards to the power behind Saturn? I mean, I know it was off limits, but was there a feeling attached
They
to
wouldn't tell us why. It was a need to know basis. Why can't we go there? Why can't we just go to Saturn? You
Mhm,
know,
mhm,
and it was kind of there's it's off limits. It's classified, none of your business. That's kind of what we got
mhm.
from that, and it was a mystery. Honestly, it was a mystery.
Was there any different kinds of travel, portaling, stargating that you experienced? Did they test you out on several different kinds to see, okay, well, he's good with
They
this?
can test all that in the very beginning with your DNA.
Yeah.
So you're qualified. So there were people. Oh, what did he tell me? So the one reptile he told me, he said there are some people that can make portals on their own.
Hmm.
That it's their DNA.
It's their DNA. Yeah.
They can just make a portal and
Mhm.
go and travel. And that would have been like that being I saw on the train.
Right.
Somebody with a higher, but they could test your DNA. And actually going through portals there were certain types of portals that if you went very often would kill you, would hurt you. And
Mhm.
so there was a train that went through a portal that I went from Mars to Ceres when I was originally sold off. And in general, when the ship jumped, it depleted your electrolytes.
Right.
You spoke about this earlier off camera, but
Mhm.
we had to have water. You had to have water immediately, or you could get sick, like an electrolyte sickness. I don't know, I forget what it was called, but it depleted your electrolytes, all of them in your body, and if you didn't get water soon, you could get sick. And
Mhm.
so they always had water there when you got off the ship. When the ship the ship we were on portaled, it was the same thing. The same was true, but it wasn't as bad.
Mhm.
You just had to water up that day. Like
Mhm.
that morning, as long as you had drank something before we left,
Mhm.
you would be okay, kind of thing. So it was a different animal altogether.
Yeah, I find that certain types of travel, especially when you go the farthest, they have the most extreme symptoms in your body. So
The
the
portal,
other,
okay, so extragalactic travel, we
mhm,
had to use a natural portal near Jupiter.
mhm,
Our ship could jump a couple times and be to the other side of the galaxy
mhm,
and back in the same day. It was no problem. But to go to another galaxy is quite a long distance. We did the distance the portal could travel was dependent on the power output of the ship making the portal.
mhm,
Completely dependent on power output, and our ship was just a cargo. I guess the battleships that the Draco had were fast and could portal very far, and they could portal far and immediately portal back. Like we had to wait a minute for it to do it again.
mhm,
So we used a natural portal around Jupiter. When you use that one, people got sick. You got nauseous. As soon when we went through the portal to another galaxy, the first 10 minutes, nobody could work. There was a light that came on that said that everybody was on pause, and the ship just sat there for 10 minutes. A lot of the first few times I did it, I got sick.
mhm.
And you got nauseous from it. It was just from the natural way it was. And then after a while, you always got sick, but after I got good at getting over it. At first, you would get sick and stay sick for 10 minutes, and after a while, it was just a few minutes after we did it a few times.
Right. I know that they use some people based on our DNA. Based on my experiences, they would use me for artifact. They use your DNA to be able to access certain places that they can't get through or to. So it's based on your DNA
Hmm,
for artifact extraction.
sure, for
Did,
entrance.
mm-hmm. Have you ever experienced that?
No, but there were caverns. There were caverns on the planet inside Ceres that were underwater that the Germans had found and let the water out and converted into apartments. And they were big stone doors. They were just it was like a door that opened into 1,000 square foot space of stone. They were big stone doors, and they converted them into apartments. And what the doors were, an operational system that was still intact, and it knew who you were. When you were outside the door, it let the person telepathically know that was inside that owned it. It let them know telepathically that you were there, and and they could tell you a message telepathically to go away, and it could cause you pain.
Mm-hmm.
If they wanted, if you didn't go away, the door could actually cause you pain until you got a certain distance away from it, and that was linked to your DNA. There was a way that blocked your DNA so that when you walked up to your door, it unlocked and let you in because it was your DNA.
Right.
And then you went in, and then you could lock it. And there was a way, there was a whole technology about that. And I just know it from visiting a girl in her apartment
Mm-hmm.
that lived there. But I don't know exactly everything. But she would mess with me, outside the door like that. And one time she did hit me with the pain part of it, and just to show that what it was. So anyhow, that was an existing ancient technology they found there. They had found the base there. The doors were made by some other race. The doors to even to entrance into from outside in space, the hangar bay doors were gigantic.
Mm-hmm.
Very, very huge, and they were made by another race.
Mm-hmm. The for lack of a better way of calling them, the Anunnaki, for example, have you ever had any experience with them? Because they use that technology, and they have had that technology here where they put their stargates in and their sarcophagus, or their like chambers. They're not cryo chambers, but
so no, I wouldn't know them by their, like, I don't remember a lot of the names about any, like even the ones that were there that I like, the tall ones that were in charge of the businesses. It's on the tip of my tongue, but I just don't know the names. They did not use the word Anunnaki, but they were looking for. We were always on the lookout for ancient tech, and a lot of times there were ruins. Like in my time on Mars, there were ruins there in a crater, and they weren't very fancy. They were stacked up basically stacked up stones, like you find in the Pacific. In Hawaii, the Hawaiians would stack rocks up and make a. They were like that, but on Mars. But they were columns that somebody made, a million years ago, and they never named who it was. They just, they said they were already been studied and don't touch them, kind of thing. But
what language did
there
you?
was no writing on it. They were just the stones piled up.
So okay, so you're 20 and back. Once you're done and you're returned here, given your DNA and its capacity, did they take you again?
So
for a double?
Look at you.
What?
So no, I don't think I went again. They did come in to get me. A few weeks later, I woke up in the middle of the night and I found myself running down the staircase and out my front door and into a van. And I believe it was a follow-up. There were guys these were humans, and they had a machine in there that made me run down to them. And they took me, I don't know. I went in there, and then they were like, okay, go to sleep. And I went back to sleep. And I believe it was a follow-up. I believe I got followed up many times. I was taken in early 2016 by, I believe, I don't want to call point fingers, but I believe the Air Force was a secret space program.
Yep.
And they took me and kept me for about 18 hours and interrogated me and drugged me. And they were able to put me back the same night I left. So in other words, they had temporal time dilation technology as well. They had the technology to take me, keep me for a long time, and put me back at the same time they took me. So that happened. I remember that. I don't know. Like I've had a bunch of weird stuff. I've had the side effects of being taken many times, and where you feel it. There's no other way for me to explain it. You feel all of a sudden terrified in the middle of the night, and you just feel it like something happened.
Yeah, and you wake up.
I haven't had anything like.
You wake up feeling drugged with PTSD, like you just had like some colossal, massive event occur. You have no memory.
I think
somatically.
There for a while, I think I was taken, like I said, taken and studied.
Yeah.
Taken, and then they followed up to make sure I was okay, and then they let me go. I went on about my life. They putting a fish back in water. They put me back, they followed up, and they just forgot about me.
I don't think they ever forget about you.
Well, especially now that I'm talking about them. Somebody up there is mad, mad about it, I'm sure.
Well, there's more mysterious operations here than even they know. What about augmentation? Genetic augmentation and
So when I was taken, so that body that I was in, I'm pretty sure was augmented greatly. I'm pretty sure that there was an implant. That is how the telepathy worked. I think that they had put an implant in your head, and all of a sudden you can use telepathy and that's how it worked. I think that there were things they did to my muscles. I think that there were things they did to my lungs that made me able to breathe on Mars better. Um, I think it was an augmentation that allows soldiers to breathe the air on Mars. I think that a lot of that went away. I think when they put me back, they took out a lot of things they put into me. Mm-hmm. Like they removed them. And then in my own life, I don't know if my regular health is going to be a factor, changing. I know I'm falling apart fast. Mm-hmm. In the last 5 years, I'm really starting to fall apart. Like I was in much better physical condition than what I am now. I think that they do augment people. I think that your genetics are augmented, and that's why it's an investment, because they can take your kids now. You can pass some DNA on to your kids, and they have a head start. So if they augment me to have a slightly quicker response time, then I pass it on to my kids, and then they augment them to have a slightly quicker response time. Guess what? They're twice as fast as the original augment. Do you get what I mean?
Oh yeah.
So I think that's a major factor, and that's what's going on.
Mm-hmm. Have you ever had any implants removed from your body?
Like in real life, no. No. Nope. I haven't had any issues that I know about.
When you say your body is deteriorating quickly or fast, what are you experiencing?
Well, I mean, I'm going to the doctor. Like they think I'm a candidate for cancer. They they want to test me for a lot of things, and I'm starting to get very, very arthritic. My vision is starting to go, on and on and on. I'm starting to not get over things the way that I used to get over things. So there's a lot, like I said, and it's all in the last. But I think it's normal. I'm 48 years old, and I hear it's pretty normal right around 50 to start falling apart. So.
Well, I also think that when you're involved in this, you're talking about time displacement regardless, because even if they put you back, it's still time displacement. And in your cells are starting to have cognitive dissonance, if you will, because of the displacement. So yeah. They can't trick that. They can only, there's like parameters of how this all works, but ultimately your cells are being split in so many different times and densities and dimensions all at the same time.
The other thing, another phenomenon that happened after was that, and I still do it, but not as often in my adulthood, but when I was a kid, ever after that happened, and well into my teen years, into my 20s even, almost every single day, right before I would wake up in the morning, almost every single day, I would dream a scene out of the day to come, a piece of the future from the day, and it always played out exactly how it was. There is a medical theory about it, saying that that's the part of your brain that, like, there are memory slots in your brain, and when you live that deja vu, it's just you're double writing to the memory slot. Mm-hmm. But this was different. This was definitely dreaming, and then there have been instances where I had dreams that told my family about it, and then later on, the dream came true. I said, "Look, it's exactly how I dreamt it," and I've done that a few times to my family. So I mean, it's not the medical thing.
No, it isn't. No, it is.
So it's a displacement. It's a side effect.
Exactly, because your consciousness is still there in all of it. So even when you were talking about how they would be 5 minutes away from, just to know whether it was successful or not, and if it wasn't successful, the mission wouldn't, it wouldn't
even go, right? It anti-telephone.
But that is registered in consciousness that's still registered in your cells because it still happened.
It still happened. Exactly. It still happened somewhere, and God knows what happened.
Right.
At that point.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. You can bake your brain thinking about it. Believe me, I have. I've sat on big sketchboards and drew it out. Like what? You know, like trying to figure it out and trying to get the time frame. The only thing that really sorted out was the math worked out that it cut about 1.5 years off of my time.
Mm-hmm.
Because I lived the 20 years, but it cut 1.5 years off of the actual time. So April of, I'm gonna look at a calendar, but basically April of 92 or April of 82 to 2002
Right.
was about the 20 years, but it was about probably April of 2000 that I was snapped out of it.
Have you ever had in 3D actual missing time that were, significant, like days or? Because when that happens, it's pretty extreme.
Yeah, I've had time that didn't. I've had times where the evenings didn't work out, didn't missing time in the evening, where I sat down to watch TV at 6 o'clock,
Mm-hmm.
and I woke up the next morning and I don't remember anything after what I watched. Like I'm watching the 6 o'clock news. I know it's over at 7. I know I was up watching TV, and all of a sudden it's the next morning. I'm not on any drugs or drinking or anything.
Mm-hmm.
And I wake up and I go, what was on TV after that? I don't remember. I just woke up in bed. I've had that happen.
What do you think is the case if somebody has missing time to the degree? Because I know with their technology, they can put us back in the second. Okay.
Yeah, well, I understand that it's about 15 minutes is the fastest they can put you back.
So 15 minutes. So if a person's missing for a week, actually physically missing.
Right. So this borrows to another case, another person that I've spoke to in the past
Mm-hmm.
that I know doesn't wish me to speak about it.
Mm-hmm.
But there are people that are taken and they ask their permission
Mm-hmm.
to go to do whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll say I'm trying to choose my words. Okay, I'm walking a line here.
Yeah.
Let's say you get taken and they go, look, we need you to do this. You're the best pilot for the job. You're the man for the job or woman.
Yeah.
And you're the best pilot we can get. We need you to do this. Mm-hmm. And you're like, I don't want to do it. Can I sleep on it? And they go, you can stay here, take as long as you want, okay? And just give it till you give it. Is it a no? No, it's not a no. Well, you can stay here until you give us an answer. Mm-hmm. And they stay there. And a week passes by and they go, yes. Mm-hmm. They get put back from that time. Do you get what I'm saying? And they're gone for a week, and all of a sudden a week later they show up, because then they do their 20 years and they go back to that moment. They don't go back to when they were, because they were also sleeping it over in the base, making up their mind. I hope that explains it.
Yeah, it does. It does. Yeah, because there's I know, there's some of us that have had quite a lot of actual missing time, and there's like no memory at all.
Yeah.
But there's physical missing time.
Well, look, I'm the rarity. Most people don't remember. A lot of people are very smart. It's not an intelligence thing. It's mm-hmm. a genetic thing. There's something else to it. But I'm a rarity. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people remember a little bit and they can't get any more, and it bothers them. So I mean, the other thing is I point this out a lot too. I knew a lot of people up there that were friends of mine while I was working on the ship, peers. They had no desire to remember any of it. Mm-hmm. They said, when I go back, I don't want to remember any of this. Mm-hmm. It'll screw me up.
Right.
And that was common. A lot of people up there had no desire. I did. I wanted to remember.
Right.
And I fought to remember. So before I came back, I kept telling myself, I'm not going to forget. I'm not going to forget. Like I worked at it.
Right. What do you remember? Okay, 2 questions. One is, what is the worst experience you remember? 2 is, do you remember going through, there's parts of the, it's like the washing. I don't know what to call it. It's just the washing. Like there's degrees where you go through and you're wiped. So like each area wipes a different thing.
Right.
And
so
then
look, I'm just going to not answer the first question. What's the worst thing I remember? I'm just going to leave that be.
Okay.
I'm saying wait for the book.
Okay.
Make up your mind, because I plan on explaining everything that happened to me in the book. And it's hard to write, and honestly things like that have been the holdup. Because what happens is when you write it, you know, talking about something bad that happens is completely different than writing it down. What happens, I've found, is I wrote a few things down and I start to relive it and I walk around depressed for a couple weeks. It's very painful.
Yeah.
So bad things happened to me
Yeah.
when I was up there. I was in combat. I was abused. I was sexually abused. I was injured many times, and there was a lot of abuse. So I'm just going to leave that.
Yeah.
The memory wiping thing was, I was a combative. They put us on hang on a second. Let me grab a water. Sorry. They put us, when it was time for me to go, they put me and about 6 or 8 other people on a disc that was kind of like a jalopy. It was grimy and dirty, had carpet in the brown room on the top where you wrote, and it was a silver disc. It was a UFO. And flew us back to the moon in like 6 hours. And from Ceres, wherever Ceres was at that time. On that flight was an African man. On the Ceres colony, they did not take Africans, black people. I don't want to be insulting to anyone. I love my friends that are African Americans, but they did not have them on Ceres colony because what I was told was that it was a separate method of mind control that they had to invest into to control African descent people. So they all tended to go to like there was a colony that the one that I met up there that rode on the craft back to me was a miner. He mined out on the asteroid belt. They were mining asteroids, and it was all African people. He was on the disc with me, and he was aware of the situation, and he was combative to the pilot and to the people that put us on. He was yelling at them, cursing at them, and saying, "What are you going to do to me?" Nothing, you know, because he was aware of the law, that the law said he's like, "This is our last day. They have to put us back." He's like, "What are they going to do? Put you in jail? They're going to take time to beat you up or do anything like that? They can't do that. They can't leave a mark on you. And they have to put us back today because tomorrow's too late. They'll get in trouble." So they're not going to do anything. You hear me? You know, like he yelled down, "You hear me, you dumbass?" Like it was like that. And so he said, go ahead, try it. Go cuss at them. Nothing's going to happen to you. And I didn't do anything on the ship. But when I got back to the moon, when I started into that process, like you said, the stations of going through the mind blanket, I was combative. I tested it, and lo and behold, he was very right. They did not know how to, there were grays that were operating. They did not know how to handle. When I started calling them names and, I hate you. And, I was using foul language. When I started with that, it felt very good. It was empowering for one. But number two, they didn't know what to do. They had no playbook at all. Zero. There was nothing they could do. And during that process, I was combative. And I was talking, So the very first thing was they took me to a thing that was a movie, like a good size movie, like have you ever seen in arcades, the video games that you can sit inside?
Yes. So
it was like that, but I was sitting on a stool and it was inside a booth like that, just like that, like an arcade. And they give you drugs. There was something stuck in me, and something put like a head thing put on you. And they show you movies and there's music and there was a man's voice and it was showing me like the Peter Pan ship, like the sailboat from Peter Pan.
Yeah.
What is that ship called? I forget. Captain Hook. You know what I'm saying? Captain Hook had that. It showed that flying through the sky, and it said, "If you ever see a craft, this is what you're gonna see." And I remember going, "This is fucking ridiculous. You guys have got to be kidding me." I was yelling it outside the booth. I was like, "You kidding me, right? Like, anyone's gonna fall for this?" I was like, and I kept telling them. They took me out, so they ran me through that for however X amount of time. They took me to another one. I said, "You got to be kidding me." And they test you. There was a test. There was a score. There was a score that the machine generated on how well it took. And that one failed. And I said, "What, are you going to try to put me through that dumb shit again? Are you going to try it again?" And then they took me to another one, and it was the blurry face, where it made everybody's. And I said, "It doesn't matter if their face are blurry. I'm still going to remember them. You're not going to ever make me forget my friends." And I was just combative, but that one did work. because I do think about even my girlfriend. I can't remember her face. Then it went to, there was another one. The next one after the blurry face one was names and words. And I just kept saying, I don't care, I don't care what you guys do. I'm going to remember this. I don't care what you take away. You can strip away bits and pieces all you want. I kept saying that. But I think it was the words. There's names. Like it took names. And really to this day, like I remember crumbs. The things that I do remember their names are because other events led to talking about the name. Like I remember the names that I do, but only by conversations that I had with people over certain things that drew up the name. Like crumbs, everybody called it scums. Ooh, you're going to scums? But it was crumbs. You know, like that's how when I tell people where I was going, everybody said the same thing. It was a joke.
Do you remember them doing any kind of erasing using electrocution, like a thin, long thing that they would put at the base of your neck?
Yeah, and then so I was eventually put on a table and had things inserted in my head, and there was shocks involved. When they found out that I wasn't, when they used the chronovisor and found out that I was going to remember, they took me to another area and put me in a chair, and there was a screen in front of me, a small screen, and it was on an arm, and it moved on its own. It came down and moved into position. And another one came off from the side, and when I looked at it, it was all static. You know, like when a channel, like on a television channel, when it's static, there's nothing, when there's no signal. It was that, and it was talking to me, and it said, "I'm your God, and I'm angry with you." And it and I got the shocks. It started shocking me because the implant was in me. I started getting shocked. "I'm your God, and I'm angry at you, and you're going to do as you're told," kind of thing. And I remember thinking to myself, "You're not my God." And then it turned it up worse, and they were showing me pictures, like first person, of people butchering people, like in Vietnam or Cambodia. Like people were walking into a village of women and children and killing them with machetes, butchering them up, like the actual first person view of it, like women and children. And I was in total shock. It put me in shock. I was like, "Quit showing me this. What is going on?" I said, "You are not my God." You know, like I was like, "What?" And then I lost consciousness. I don't know what happened after that.
Yeah, that was a deep programming.
Yeah.
Do you remember how they repaired you?
No. So I was injured badly twice. There were 2 times when I was injured. I was injured plenty of times, but there were 2 times when it was like, severe. And both times they put me under for the whatever process they did. And I woke up in a hospital bed, totally fixed in a short time.
Did you have any experiences here in Real D that equated with that? Like, because sometimes they'll cause an accident here at the exact same time that they're repairing you or doing a surgery?
That's a good question, because now that you say that, I think I'm going to go ahead and draw it up on the timeline, because I have a few windows of when it would have happened. And I need to look back on it and look at my actual timeline, because I broke my arm once and a couple other times I was injured. Nothing major. But there are some things that could line up that I could think about, but that's a good point. That's definitely worth, I would suggest anybody to look into that. Do your timeline. The best thing anybody can do that is an experiencer is write up a timeline, and anything weird, any emotional change, everything, because then you can start looking at it from the big picture, and it's really telling. So, but I'm going to go and rework that, because that's a great point.
Did you ever meet your clone? I mean, no. There's many, but was there ever a time when they replaced you?
I don't believe so, no. One thing is I did look exactly like I do. Like it was an exact look. Like at the certain ages, my eyes really stood out, and everybody would always recognize and give me something to make a comment about my eyes. And in the 20 and back, in the same ages, I still got comment like, "Wow, look at his eyes." Like I got that a lot. And I would look in the mirror, and I look pretty terrible without a beard as an adult. But without facial hair, it's just not a good look for me. And they wouldn't let me grow any facial hair on series. So a lot of people said like, "Boy, you'd look better with if you let your hair grow out." Like a lot of people said it to me, like, "You would look great with a beard. You're a guy that, you know what I mean?" Like,
Why didn't they let you have a beard?
it was standard procedure. You went to the barber, like we went through showers like lined up. When you got out
No.
of the shower, everything was on a hook, and then you went and you got inspected before you went to work. And when your hair started to get long, you go to the barber, and it was only 15 minutes. You go get your hair cut, and they would shave you.
Mm-hmm.
So I got stubble a few times, but every once a week or something, they'd send you to the barber over there, and you would just get the once over. And it was very routine the way they had all that set up.
Do you think there's a connection with the way that you lived your life in Real D with regards to chaos and the events that were happening while you were operational?
Absolutely, and still to this day. So you got to understand, I was not a citizen.
Mm-hmm.
I was not a participant.
Mm-hmm.
I was a slave. I was a piece of equipment, and I was spoken to as such,
Mm-hmm.
treated as such. They took very good care of my health, very good. Like I had 3 hot and a cot,
Mm-hmm.
right? But I was kicked regularly. I was the dog that got kicked, and in my real life,
Mm-hmm.
I have that same mentality. Like it's very hard for me. I've taught myself to stick up for myself. I have taught myself to have a better self-esteem, but it required a lot of teaching because that mentality came with me.
Mm-hmm.
It stayed with me,
Mm-hmm.
and I still do. I still have a lot of things I sabotage myself. I think people tell me I'm likable a lot, but other than that, I don't have. There's a lot of things. There's a lot of things in the terms of self-preservation and in like personal finances and things
Mm-hmm.
that I think I would have had if I didn't go on the 20 and back. Because everybody does,
Mm-hmm.
because it's normal, and I don't have it. You get what I'm saying? Like I never had. I lived those 20 years without money,
Yeah.
without any kind of bill.
There's,
Without bills.
yeah, there's latency. There's a evolutionary arrested development that happens as a result. So we tend to be late bloomers as a result of it because we've missed, so
Well,
much.
you think in subconsciously that the world is going to operate like the world you already grew up in.
Yeah.
And I was a kid and I grew up, and then I went back to being a kid, and then I expected the world to be like that again.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a different world. I was not in the military anymore.
Yeah.
I got to take care of myself.
Yeah.
And so that was the hard. That's kind of a thing that's left over is I don't, what I mean? I'm not as good at taking care of myself as I should have been.
Do you think they still engineer your life?
I sure hope not. I think that there are influences. When I first started doing interviews, technical issues followed me everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
They still do, kind of.
Mm-hmm.
I get my phone hacked quite often.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know by who, but it gets hacked. I get my computers hacked. You can see it. They slow down. It's obvious. I've been hacked many times. And people that are see my info, I've been hacked. I've caught people hacking too. But so other than that, like an electronic influence, I don't know.
Mm-hmm. What about in the people that are in your life? Because generally speaking, they sound.
I suspect some people like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Are you sent here to trip me up because it's working? Like
Right.
some people I'm like, are you out? You're just doing this so you can get close to me, and then all of a sudden at the last minute tell me to stop. Like it's suspectful, but there's a line of paranoia
Mm-hmm.
that you just have to deny. And even if it's real, it's like I have to not be afraid of it.
Right.
Like talking about it in the first place, I was scared.
Mm-hmm.
But there's I reached a point where I'm like, look, I'm not going to be afraid. If they're going to do something, they're going to do something. But I'm not going to worry. I'm going to play my part.
Right.
I'm going to live my life and not be scared of my shadow.
Mm-hmm. Did they handle your parents to handle you?
Probably.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Did you ever fall in love over there?
Yep.
What was that like coming back?
Well, that's why I wanted to remember it. And I waited to find her again, and I shouldn't have. Mm-hmm. And over there, I fell madly in love with a girl who was a sex worker. She was a slave herself, and she had only been in 7 years. So she had 13 years more to go when I was going home. And so it was heartbreaking to me that I got demoted. I disobeyed direct orders in my last 6 months or so, and I got demoted. I could no longer see her. I lost money so that I couldn't travel. They cut my pay, and they took my money I had saved, and I could no longer travel into town. I could never see her again. And I had and also because of like I said, the culture of when you're about to leave, everybody knows it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had another girlfriend. I had another, I guess, sexual relationship with actually two girls.
Mm-hmm.
But it wasn't the same. I wasn't in love with them. You know what I mean? Like it wasn't the same. And it was like it was to try to get over her, and it totally didn't work. And so I was just, I mean, the day I left, when they put me on that disc, I was dying to see her again and say goodbye, and I couldn't do it. You know what I mean? Like her and I dreamed of it, and we always talked about what it would be like when on the last day we were together, and it was like we got robbed of it. So yeah. Another thing, it's common with people that I've spoken to that people that do fall in love over there tend to find each other when they get back here.
Mm-hmm.
It's a phenomenon they don't understand. It's
Mm-hmm.
probably a quantum mechanic thing, you know what I mean, between consciousness, who knows? But it does happen a lot, and it gets talked about quite a bit.
Do you ever remember seeing any stars there?
What do you mean?
Like, there's so many people involved. There's a lot of stars that are involved as well.
No, no, no. They there was a television event one time, and I don't know if it was a fight. It was a fight.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it was on Earth or from another planet, but it was on every TV ever. When you walk down the street,
Mm-hmm.
there were screens everywhere with TV,
Mm-hmm.
and that fight was on. It was a big event, and I don't know if it was but I didn't pay attention. I was ticked off that I didn't have a TV. I did not have a smartphone or a piece of glass. They call it a piece of glass that was basically a smartphone. And so I had no access to television or the internet that they had, and I was mad about it. I was resentful. So when they were like, we should watch this, I was like, I ain't watching that. I can't get into it anyway, But as far as meeting in person, no, definitely not.
No. Do you remember that the way that they would teach you sometimes would be through cerebral, it's like a quantum computer they would just download, but it was really
The
painful.
quick stuff. No, I did go to school, so there was actually old-fashioned schooling,
Mm-hmm.
somewhat. For some things, they'd slap a book and tell you to read it and test you on it.
Mm-hmm.
That was on Ceres Colony. There was testing where they gave you a drug. Though, so we have it today. The binaural stuff. Have you heard of any of the binaural therapy? It was only for 6 minutes before every day that we studied in school. They would play a binaural, the hum,
Mm-hmm.
whatever, 60 hertz or 20 hertz, whatever it is. I think it's 20 is the one. They would play that for 6 minutes. They said any longer than 6 minutes, nothing binaural works. That's what they told me. So it was 6 minutes of that, and then we got eye drops that had drugs in them. It was some kind of drug, and then you were plugged into a screen, and where your eyes looked on the screen would select your answer, and you would watch movies, and then select they would flash two squares with the answers written inside of them, and if you stared at the one,
Mm-hmm.
it would flash, is this your answer? And you kept staring at it, and it was that your answer, and then it would go to the next movie or the question, and that was school.
Mm-hmm. So you never experienced any of the invasive techniques where they would just download the information in you, and then your eyes would sometimes bleed?
No, not that I recall. No.
Mm, okay. What do you think is their plan for you?
I think they already had their plan for me. I think that I ticked off somebody, and they threw me into one of those programs as a resource. And in the beginning, it was for a small program, and I just got shuffled around into space. And then they put me back, and that's it. And I think their plan was for me to just go back to my life and shut up and die.
Mm-hmm.
And I also think that, man, you're getting stuff out of me. So I'm afraid that my kids go.
Yeah.
I think that there's a real genetic program, and there are things I still don't want to. There's things I'm still not ready to talk about.
Mm-hmm. You know, when you say that, okay, so I'm just going to play devil's advocate for a second, because although you say that you were in the wrong place at the wrong time, you ticked off the wrong kid, and he, you know, which I believe, but I also think that there's a possibility that that was engineered because they already tracked you.
Yeah, I mean, I was okay. There's more to it. There's more to it, and I really don't want to talk about it at this time. But to make a long story short, yes,
Mm-hmm.
like it was supposed to happen. It was not up to them. They were players, and somebody else put them up to it. Yeah, you're absolutely right. But that's a story for another. That's like a whole another subject matter. I mean,
Well,
really.
maybe we can get into more, you know, on a next time, because I would love to have
Sure.
you back.
Yeah, that'd be fine.
It's been absolutely amazing and an honor.
Thanks. Me too.
You're doing a service
You,
that is
you're
great.
very good at this. You're very good at asking some very tough questions that are important. So anytime, you know, I'm talking about things like this, it's great for people to cut to the. I enjoy the questions. The tougher, the better. Even if
Well,
I don't.
I mean, yeah, you can only do that if you come from the inside, I think, because on certain levels, right? Because
Right.
there's so many experiences, and you know, between all of us, we're connecting really important information that, and I really do feel that all this has to be exposed. And I do feel that there are factions that are done with this.
Right. I do
So
too.
we're a part of that.
Well, you know, it was well known that none of the like those advanced beings that had a certain rating. It was well known that none of them had slavery.
Mm-hmm.
None.
None.
Zero.
No.
So the Series colony knew it was coming
Mm-hmm.
eventually if they wanted to be advanced, but
Yeah,
they were enjoying the shortcut while they could.
exactly. So would love to get into part 2 at some point, and I know everybody would love it too. It's been absolutely an honor. I'm just going to ask you to stay on for a minute after I stop recording.
Yeah, sure.
If you want to say anything else to anybody before we
Just if I would say that if anybody, you know, if anybody is listening to this and anything that we're saying, they're hearing for the first time and they're skeptical, I would say congratulations. It would be weird if you weren't skeptical. Okay, number one. Number two, after that, go and research it. Go and research 20 and back. Go and research me. Go and research, go to exopolitics. Look, there's lots of stuff out there supporting this, and this is a very real phenomenon. It's a very real thing, and people need to know because you can't get your head around it is also by design. Um, Anybody that feels they've gone through any of this, I am working on a website that's going to have, you know, basically a beginner's guide on how to deal with it. I would say that the best thing to do is to find someone to talk to. Talking about anything traumatic is the best therapy and really the only therapy that I've learned. But make a timeline, write down every little thing that doesn't make sense, and keep it somewhere safe and update it often and reach out to people and talk.
Tony, it has been an absolute honor. You are absolutely priceless.
Thank you.